Hi, everybody. Welcome. Can everybody hear me way over there in the far distant corners of the world? Okay, great. Over there too? All good? Great. My name is Carol Willing. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today. And I really enjoyed all three of the keynotes. And I want to thank the organizers for putting together such a diverse schedule. And they've worked so hard. I spent the past 2 days doing the sprints. So I encourage you, visit the sponsors, thank the organizers, have a great time yourselves, and I'm here for you. I'm going to give a brief talk about the state of Python and some other things that I care about. So, what is the state of Python? Well, Python is very much more than code, but it's code and community, and it lets us make a global connection. So I was very pleased when I saw, or I met Younggun back, probably now like 3-4 years ago, and I realized he had an amazing connection with the people in Asia Pacific. And what I wanted was him to go and work on the Python Software Foundation so that we could have even stronger connections globally. And I think it was a huge success. I actually was very, very pleased to be invited here. And please feel free to ask me questions. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm actually part of the inaugural steering council of Python the language. I'm a core developer like Predin. I am a PSF fellow. I am a past director of the Python Software Foundation. And recently I was honored with the Frank Willison Award, which when I read the email, which I almost deleted by accident, brought me almost to tears, because that award is given to people who have not only achieved technical success, but more importantly, community success. And that's something that I'm really proud of. So in addition to Python, I'm also a core developer and a steering council member on Jupyter. If anybody's used a Jupyter notebook, I probably had something to do with it at some point in time, and I will take all the complaints on it. I'm going to talk a little bit about JupyterrHub and BinderHub and some of the things that are going on. I also am a core developer on Interact, which is a React.js front end for the notebooks, and different approach, but some really great things coming out of that as well. So today, what I'm going to do is spend a little time talking about Python as it is in 2019, because we've had some changes in the last year. And then I'm going to talk about how using Jupyter and Interact and some other tools, we can communicate with each other and make connections with each other that through the code. And what, like Lucy had mentioned earlier, you can really make an impact on the world and the people around you. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about Python's future and some of the keys to the future, because as Predin had the picture about Android and there wasn't any picture there, I have a few things that are going to hopefully change that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about community, what makes a successful community, and then wrap up with some ideas of what you might be interested in doing going forward. So Python last year, like a year and a month ago, Guido decided that he was going to step down as the benevolent dictator for life. Took us all by surprise, and all of a sudden, the Zen of Python, which is, make things simple, became a lot more complicated, and we had to choose a new governance for a language that was close to 30 years old. So, as part of the Zen of Python governance, one thing is clear. Change is a constant. You're always going to see change in the world around us. And that can be scary sometimes, or it can be a huge opportunity as well. Writing great code or great languages requires a lot of communication, not just communication with the computer itself, but communication with other people who may have very different ideas than you have. And those people have opinions, and they're often not shy about sharing their opinions. So I would encourage you, stand by your principles, but do it in a nice way. I am more than happy to listen to what people have to say as long as it's thoughtful and respectful. So where are we with Python today? So we've got code and we've got language. We're seeing huge growth in Python, particularly in the last 5 years. We're changing in governance, so how we've done things in the past may not be how things will be going forward. We're getting ready to release Python 3.8, which has some really new things. And one of my favorites is we are saying goodbye to Python 2. And I'm very excited about that. I know that there will be legacy code still out there, which I am sure that the market and the industry will find a way to support. But in terms of the core language, we're going to focus on 3 and beyond. So why have we seen growth? Well, we've seen growth and we know we have growth by looking at the statistics that are on PyPI, and also on Conda Forge, for those of you that might be in the science or data science world. Conda Forge is another packaging repository, and recently the two groups got together at PyCon 2019 and had some good conversations. So, folks like me who have to use both don't have to wipe their computer and start all over again every month like I did several years ago. So what's behind the growth? Well, the last speaker said Python can do everything. And in some ways, it's really true. We can do web with Python. We can do DevOps. We can do system administration and orchestration, scripting. But we can also do some really cool things now with embedded systems and in the Maker community. MicroPython, CircuitPython, Raspberry Pi has pushed Python from the cloud and from the desktop into small devices. So you can actually write whole programs in Python that actually do meaningful work, where before you had to use C or C++. Another place that we're seeing growth is in data science and science. This is Fernando Perez. Thankfully, he was bored once as a PhD student and made this thing called IPython, which then became IPython Notebook, which then became Jupyter. And out of several weeks of work and procrastination on writing his thesis, we have something that is profoundly changing the world in data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and visualization. So I'm very pleased that I've had the opportunity to work with him the last several years. So governance post-BDFL. Guido's retired. Oops. The whole Python core development community and others spent a good 6 months investigating different ways to organize people, which is not an easy thing when you have over 100 people with very different opinions. And so there were a series of PEPs, which are Python enhancement proposals, where people actually wrote down what some other communities were doing for governance, what possibly could work for Python. And then at some point, we had to make a decision. And we voted. And in the end, what was selected is the steering council model. So there are 5 people now that help guide the governance of Python. So we set the direction, and we help people get the resources that they need, but we're not the final person to do all the work. But much like what Guido did before, make decisions about the language itself, that is the role of the steering council today. PEP 13 talks about in more detail what we can do and can't do. What we're trying to do is really seek consensus among the core developers, but also beyond the core developers, because I come from the science, data science world, as well as education and embedded systems, and the needs that we have might be very different than web or systems administration. And I think it's important for Python's continued growth to really give everyone a voice and to be able to listen to the needs of others. So back in February, we elected the first steering council for Python the language, and I'm very happy that Barry Warsaw, who's been part of the language for a long time, Brett Cannon, who is very tall, but also one of the nicest human beings you will meet, who's been involved with the language for a long time, myself. Guido happily came back and also ran for the steering council, and Nick Coughlin, who's been involved in Python for as long as I can remember, and packaging and making sure things work. And so far, it's been a really great group, and we've tried to share what we're doing with the community so you know what we're doing. And we'll see how it goes. I wanted to recognize the people that, or a subset of the people that actually develop the core language themselves. All of these folks are volunteers, myself included. We don't get paid to write the code that we do, the documentation, speaking, answering emails, trying to delete the emails that maybe are offensive, but, or respond to them thoughtfully. And so these volunteers are really making the language strong. And what we need are other people to help us. And if you enjoy writing Python, you enjoy complex, sometimes, issues, we welcome you. There's a core mentorship group that helps you get started. And I know I met somebody yesterday at the sprints who actually contributed to core Python, so that was pretty cool. So thank you to everybody who makes the language possible. Python 3.8, it's been about a year in the works. If you go to the Python website, there's a listing of all the Python enhancement proposals, which have in great detail what is in Python 3.8, what's new, what's gone. The other thing you can do right now is you can actually download a beta version, which is pretty close, because the release date, I think, is in September. So I would encourage you to try it out, try your projects with it, let us know if something's broken. We're going to see some changes when it comes to functions and parameters that are passed into functions. You are now going to be able to pass positional-only parameters, which for people who are writing libraries and APIs, it's a really nice thing. But if it's not something that you wish to use, that's totally fine, because you don't have to. You can keep doing what you've been doing. The very contentious walrus or assignment operator is now in Python 3.8. F-strings have a really cool new feature where there will be an assignment or an equals specifier. So, if you often want to say such and such variable is equal to X, you can now do it in a very nice, compact way with F-strings. And then there's more stuff about Python's configuration, and in the data science world with really large data sets, the Pickle protocol number 5 is something that we're looking forward to. So farewell to Python 2, hello Python 3. For many years, people wondered, would we ever adopt Python 3 in the community, out in the real world? And happily, yes. I can remember when this website started. It's the Python Readiness website, and it takes the 360 most popular Python libraries, and for a long time, some were only available on Python 2. I am really happy to say now, the top 360 libraries in Python all support Python 3, which is a huge accomplishment for our community. So if you're wondering when Python's going to go away, it's going to be the 1st of 2020. That is when we will cease development on Python 2. One of the things that we thought was very important as a steering council and the Python Software Foundation was to hire a very capable project manager, Sumana, who did a lot of great work with pip when it went to and warehouse with the new front end and reintroduction. And so she will be also working hard behind the scenes and sharing information about, what does this really mean to our community? So in reality, I think Guido said it very well, that programming languages are how programmers communicate ideas, and the audience for those ideas is other programmers or users, not computers. So remember, what we're doing, even though it's cool and fun and making new things on a computer is great, down the line, you're making a game because it's fun, or there's some person behind what you're actually doing. So talking a little bit more about communicating through code, I'm going to switch to JupyterrHub, Interact, and Binder, which are all based on Python, but are tools that let you get things done on a day-to-day basis. So first, Jupyter. Jupyter's notebooks, hopefully many of you have seen it. If not, I encourage you to try it. It's not just a place to code, but also a place to communicate ideas, because you can combine prose with execution. And back in 2014, I do a lot of work teaching, and I decided, this IPython notebook thing seems cool. Let me see if I can teach a workshop with others in the San Diego community. And we did it. And at that point, it was IPython notebook. It hadn't even become Jupyter notebooks. And everything had to be installed on your local computer. Now, 5 years later, there's over 5 million notebooks checked into GitHub. And many of those you can actually run in the browser, without having to install anything, which is a huge accomplishment for education, as well as just getting work done when and where you want it. Jupyter's growth, we've became the de facto standard in the industry, and we're very honored to be recognized by the association, the ACM, as the Software System Award in 2017. That's the same award that people like Java or the internet itself or TCP/IP received. The World Wide Web had won that award. So it was really humbling to our small team. And we are a pretty small team. These are the core developers or the core people in Project Jupyter. Project Jupyter started as an academic project, and about half of us now are volunteers contributing to the project. Some of us over the years had been under part of the grants that we had very generous grant funders for, and I think one of the keys to our success and Jupyter's success was the fact that it let you do things interactively on the web. It was language agnostic. Although it uses Python to run the backend and run the kernels, you can use R, Julia, Python, Haskell, just about every other kernel for languages that you can think of are out there. And those are all maintained by the community. So there's actually even a second Python kernel beyond the IPython kernel, which is called Zeus Python. And that actually uses some C++ under the hood to make it even faster. So you should know that it's out there. And the fact that it's open source, much like we've heard all day today, that anybody in the world can use it. There aren't necessarily any barriers in terms of payments or things like that. So it's the perfect thing for science, for research, for sharing, for collaborating, for education. And another project I mentioned I was interested in and active in is Interact. And Interact is very much like the Jupyter notebook, but it has a React JavaScript front end. Jupyter Lab is also something that is out there that is the new version of Jupyter Notebooks. And that has a lot of great windowing and more IDE-like features that data scientists are very interested in. But for teaching, I also felt like it was really important to have that simplicity of the notebook, because I think the design simplicity of the notebook made it so that it wasn't scary for people, and it let you get meaningful work done in 5 lines of code or less, and then share it with others. Now, Netflix has been a big financial supporter of the Interact project, and beyond that, we started the project to create like a different notebook environment, and what we found is there was a lot of workflow needs when using notebooks that we didn't face before notebooks were being used. Like, how do you run notebooks in an automated fashion? How do you store them at scale? And we've solved some really interesting projects to put together these pipelines and data workflows. And one of the projects that's furthest along is Papermill. And Papermill is also open source, and it lets you execute notebooks that you can parameterize the values. So say I want to run the same notebook every day, and I don't want to actually type the numbers in each time. I can use Papermill to load the daily numbers in using like a background job, and then execute and then store the notebook using Commuter or some other service. So it's been really great to see that you can do those things at scale. Now, perhaps one of my favorite recent things is Binder. And if you haven't seen Binder, this is just an awesome thing. It basically, for free, lets you drop any GitHub repo name into the page, click launch, and it builds you a Jupyter notebook environment to run the code. You can use Jupyter Lab, you can use RStudio, you can use Julia, and it is really profoundly changing education. We developed it initially for sharing scientific research so that you could, check and see if you could reproduce somebody's paper with the data that they had. But one easy way of trying it, the Binder service is at mybinder.org, but if you go to the Jupyter.org website, you can actually click on the Try It link, and it will launch Jupyter Lab there for you, or other options that we've had. And one of the scientists in Europe put together a really cute comic about how to go from a research paper to hosting it on Binder so that you can share it with your friends. And I want you to share with you right now that all of these slides, are available on speakerdeck.com under my name, so they'll be there afterwards, so don't worry if you missed a click or whatever when you were taking pictures. So Binder lets folks make beautiful things, such as, once you hit launch, what Binder does is actually takes a while, because what it's doing is it's taking your code, it's composing a Docker file, then it's actually launching a Docker container up on top of Kubernetes, and maybe I didn't do the whole demo, but we'll suffice it to say, then you get an environment where you can actually work in. So what are the keys to Python's future? Well, I think in many ways, it is the web and the interactivity we see on the web. It's the ability to have some way to distribute binaries that is easier than everybody having to pip install or conda install things. And I think mobile is hugely important. Many of us spend the day with our cell phones in our hands and do a lot of real work on it. So I think it's really important that we address mobile. So I want to take a quick tour through what's going on in the web, and these are all things that are happening now, but if you extrapolate out, you can see there's going to be a lot more stuff that's going to happen over the next few years. JavaScript and WebAssembly. I don't view JavaScript as a rival to Python. I actually view it as a friend and something that makes your solutions better when working on the web. And WebAssembly, I've been playing around with for the past year or so, and it's going to be sort of a game changer with Python and the web. So there's a project out there called PyLadies, which Mozilla is sort of shepherding, and it lets you run interactive notebooks in sort of a different way. It's aimed more at publishing documents, and it's using WebAssembly. So you can actually extend, they've ported some Python packages to it, but you can also do like a variant of pip install and create even more package support for it. So I would encourage you to check that out. Visualization with YT, which is a large data set visualizer often used in space research, and Jupyter Widgets is letting us visualize huge, enormous data sets that we didn't think we could visualize before. And WebAssembly has been part of that because it lets us only use the data that's changed as opposed to all the data when animating something. A good example is IPyVolume. IPyVolume is something it's a Python package, you import it in your notebook, and you can do a whole bunch of visualizations, 3D visualizations. This kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor. That's somebody's body and their organ structure, and somebody's modeling of a skull and then what the human features might possibly be. So IPyVolume lets you do all of that today, which I think is pretty exciting and is really pushing animation. And JavaScript is part of the tool that lets us do that. So Python and JavaScript working together give us IPyVolume. Animation in education is particularly compelling. Several years ago, a friend of mine, a professor at UC Davis, put together a series of notebooks that would actually simulate how a person balances and stands. And each notebook took a different aspect. There was physics, there was mathematical calculations, there was motion, and in the end, in the very last notebook, you had sort of a somewhat realistic looking figure that would then go back and forth and balance. And you could change the parameters, so you could say, okay, if I make the person taller, how does that impact balance? Another thing, this is available on the Jupyter website as an example, is K3D. And I think the compelling thing to me with this is how clear the resolution is and how much you can really manipulate. Binaries. I said installing stuff in Python is not always easy. We want to make that easier and make the user experience easier. What we want to do is get to a simplified install, much like we do with Interact, where you kind of click and then install with one click, just like you would any Windows or Mac package, and then double-click a file to launch. And I think that's really important. I am very pleased to say that Beware, which lets you build cross-platform binaries, was just funded by the Python Software Foundation to help improve education. And I would encourage you to check that out. They're wonderful, a wonderful project, too, to get started contributing to if you're interested in that. And then web distribution, I can't get too much into it right now, but WebAssembly will let us encapsulate code into a sandbox and distribute it in a secure way. And I think that's going to be really useful for Python. Things like the binder service and Pyodide, you'll be able to drag and drop things onto those user interfaces, have it launch in a secure sandbox. And I think that's really compelling. And then take your results and share it in a secure way. Mobile. We want to be portable for global users. Much of the world, web access, hardware, electricity are not a given like in the Western world in terms of stability. And there are much more people using mobile than have access to actual computers. And so mobile is a huge part of that story. JupyterrHub, which is what Binder is built upon, JupyterrHub lets you run a group of notebooks for all these people. So if I have a class, I can serve 1,000 students in a freshman UC Berkeley class. With JupyterrHub, none of them have to have anything but a web browser, which really kind of levels the playing field between people who are very wealthy and people who are perhaps struggling to even buy a computer. Everybody has the same experience in the class, which I think is really an important thing. Binder itself, we talked a little bit about it. This is a researcher in England who's also an educator. She developed basically a workshop on her phone while she was in the park and deployed it all on her mobile phone, which kind of shows you the power of these tools working together. So what can you do? Well, you can keep up to date on what's going on in WebAssembly. You can give Rust and Wasm and Python together a try. There was a great sprint this past 2 days on Rust Python, and you might want to check out some of the stuff. I know we rewrote the intro developer docs, so that should make it easier for the next person to get started. Try Beware and the different tools that are under Beware. And as you're developing your own applications and tools, think about the user experience. A project that is difficult to use is not a project that's going to be successful long term. Each time you throw up a hurdle into somebody using your project, it's a time for them to say, I might use something else. So in the last few minutes as I wrap up, I want to go back to the theme of this conference, which is connect with Pythonistas. How do we bring code and community together to make really amazing things? And the award that I mentioned that I got earlier this year was about contributions. And a quote from Tim O'Reilly, which he's a publisher, contributions can encompass so much more than code. A successful software community requires time, dedication, communication, and education, as well as elegant code. So all of these things beyond just learning the language constructs itself are really important. But we're developers, we have limited time. So what are some of the sensible defaults we can take away and use in our own community and as we further our journey with Python? Oops. Clicker. Respect, I think, should be at the top of the list. Respect other people's time, agree and disagree gracefully, and sometimes pause and realize, like, your approach may not be the best. It may be possible, but it may not be the best given any number of factors. And to do that, we really need to listen, understand, and value the ideas of others. We spent a lot of time when we were developing Jupyter, JupyterrHub, Binder, arguing, listening, trying things, failing, trying again. And I think it's proven itself to be a really positive thing. I think it's really important to share not just our successes, but our failures as well, because we learn a lot through failure. Share your experiences just like you are here. Go out, go back to your community, share what you've learned. And share in the risk and reward, recognizing that it takes a whole group of people to make a programming language. It would be risky to try and make a programming language on your own today, but by working together, the rewards can be huge. Remember that trust is really important. Negativity really brings the creative process to a halt, so try to avoid any toxic behaviors and silencing other people's viewpoints. Humility is hugely important. I have done a lot of things in the Python world and Jupyter world, but each day I'm learning something new. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I'm trial and error, I'm listening, I'm learning from students, and I think learning is the key. Don't stop learning. Recognize that there's so many cool things you can learn from others, and then innovate on them. Have a bold vision. So, coming back to where we are today and this conference, Connect the Pythonistas. Guido said a long time ago that a programming language created by a community fosters happiness in its users and around the world. I believe that is absolutely true. I also believe the future of Python depends on you. And there are great things happening in the Korean community with Python, and I would say keep making great stuff. So I want to thank everybody for listening to me. I will be around the next day and a half or so, and happy to answer questions. I absolutely love hearing what you're working on, so please do tell me, even if you're just getting started. I often learn things from speaking to other people about what they're doing. Another quick shout out to the organizers who have put so much effort into this conference. Join the Python Software Foundation. It's free to join. It helps the Python language be strong. It helps you have a voice in where Python is going. And it also does great things like sponsor conferences like these and grants for development things like Beware in education. And with that, thanks again. I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for being a great audience.